Quick introduction of myself. I'm Anne Jones. I'm a Sustainability Advisor for WineGB. Bit of a disclaimer, I'm also the Development Director for the Regenerative Viticulture Foundation. So I tend to think that regenerative viticulture is probably part of the answer. I hope the panel agree with me mostly, but we're not here as a promotion for Regen, but I think we're here to talk about the way that maybe some of those practices can help defend our vineyards. Now, I just wanted to get a little show of hands so that we frame this discussion helpfully. Who in the room is a producer? Who has vineyards? Okay, so we won't get too technical on that then. Who's here? Who's got a press and PR? Who might be retail? And who's on trade? Okay, great. So we've got a lovely split. Yeah, you are allowed to have your hand up in more than one category. It's fine. This is obviously a discussion for you guys as well. So we can take some questions as we go. I'll hold a little bit of time for questions at the end. But if you desperately want to ask something that's pertinent to what the panel have just said, please do put your hand up and wave it vigorously. And we'll try and take a few questions so that you get them answered as we go. Because otherwise, it's sometimes that you lose the moment if we hold them till the end. So we've got an excellent panel here. We've got Jean-Marc from Lafage. We've got Jorge from Tenerife, from amazing say it again. Viñátigo. Viñátigo. I always get it the wrong way around. Bruce from Bruce Jack and Kirsty from Wiston Estate. So they will introduce themselves briefly as we go through. But what we've got is an amazing mix of different ecosystems and different climates. We've got the very hottest, with real issues with no water, and we've got issues with way too much water here in the UK. So we're going to talk about how we as an industry can adapt to climate issues. We all know, I hope we all know that climate change is a problem for viticulture and for the future direction of viticulture. If you don't agree that that's a problem, then you're probably in the wrong talk. But we're here to have a look at how that works from different perspectives. So I'm going to move on with the first question now. I was going to frame this by saying that we are here to focus on the environmental and a little bit of the economic discussion. We do believe that sustainability covers other aspects, but there's a panel on people tomorrow, and we're also not going to talk about packaging today because it's just such a broad topic it would deserve a panel all of its own. So we're focusing on economic and environmental today. So what is your biggest climatic challenge in your vineyard, and what are you doing to mitigate it? And I'm going to come to Jean-Marc first.
Hello, hi, thank you for being here. So I'm Jean-Marc Lafage in Domaine Lafage in the Roussillon. The Roussillon is a place located very south of France, near the Spanish border on the Catalan side, Barcelona side. We are making wine for 1,000 years. And for the last, I will say, 20 years, we are seeing a big climate change. And for the last now 10 years, 5 years in the company, we decided to put in place a small department just doing research and investigation in viticulture to be able to correct a little bit what the climate is giving us. Our main problem will be water availability. We don't have much water. In the past, I will say the root of the place was to make, for 100 years, was to make 45 wines, like Mori, like Rivesalt, like Banyuls. And to make those kind of wines, what they wanted is to have low crop and high sugar. So it was a completely different kind of winemaking, of wine growing. And in the 80s, we had our neighbors, people from the Languedoc, asking us if we wanted more water because they were having water coming from the Rhône River. And at that time, people were just focusing in sweet wine, and they didn't want to enter in this game because they were thinking they will lose their root, they will lose their DNA. And so they decided to say no. And I would say like 20 years after, I became winemaker. And I was very struggling with water. I'm still is. And we had to find solution to see what about this water availability, and overall how to cultivate water. The main point in our place is how to cultivate water. So in this research, we have the government involved with us to check all the trials we are doing. And what we've seen is following the soil, following the plant, and following the atmosphere, we don't have the same needs to grow vines. And we've been developing a system to account the stress of the plant following the time of the year. Doing that, we've seen that we've been able to reduce the quantity of water of 2/3. So I mean, at the beginning, people were used to use about 1,000 cubic meters of water per hectare. Today, we're using between 400 and 500 millimeters when we have very, very low quantity of water. Just to give an idea, the last 3 years, we had like the same water they've got in Marrakesh. So it can be is something which is impacting because it's something you are not used to listen, and it's maybe something very easy to understand. So we were in a Mediterranean kind of climate. We are moving to an arid climate, which is more and more difficult to manage. So cultivating water is a good point, knowing when the plant needs or not water. So we just put the water when the plants needed it, when we can put water, because we don't have much water. After, what we do work with is biochar and compost. We are one of surely the people in France who are doing much more research in biochar with kind of organic matter. Yeah, biochar is a kind of charcoal made with a pyrolyze. So it's a kind of charcoal made with no emission of carbon, carbon emission, which is good. And this biochar has the capacity to hold a lot of water, to hold a big quantity of water. So what we do co-compost biochar with our normal compost, which can be a compost from animals, so can be a compost from the marc, from the grapes, can be a compost from wood. And we do blend together, and we do treat the vineyard with a certain quantity. It works, I will say, very, very well in young plantation, and it works maybe is a bit longer term for old vineyard, because the roots are already down, and it's more difficult to see the result. But anyway, the biochar is a very good tool. What we try to do is to have more water retention from the soil. So if we have a better retention of our soil, of humidity, of water, we will feel that we will surely be able to have a better response from the plant. And what maybe the third investigation we did, which has been doing great, and we have 2 wines to show you in our booth, is the regenerative viticulture, doing all of that and helping the soil, and just bringing the small quantity of water when we need, and was doing a good result, but still not enough. It's too dry, actually. So we decided to work with the University of Montpellier of selecting the good period of harvest to make fresh wines. So when you have your fruit development overall in Grenache, Grenache is the main varietal we have in our place, you can have the first kind of flavor will be like spicy flavor. After, you will have like a fruity flavor, like raspberry or strawberry. After, you will have a black flavor, and maybe after you will get some jammy flavor. The idea was to try to have a wine maybe more elegant, fresher, where the plant is not still suffering too much, and so stop at the first or second stage, which is to us the fresh flavor. And instead picking the grapes at Grenache, you can pick at 10% volume alcohol, but you can also pick at 20% alcohol if you want. It's just a matter of waiting. So the idea was to pick at between, I will say, 12-13% volume when the fruit flavor is very fresh fruit flavor dominant, and having a quite balanced wine. You have to think that in the Roussillon, average yield is 25 hectoliters per hectare to 30 hectoliters per hectare. So it's very low yield, high concentration, and maybe not need to wait too long, because more we wait, more we let the grapes into on the top of the vine, and more the vine suffer to get it to the last month of growing. If we are able to pick the grapes 1 month before, the plant also recover. So it's also a way of helping the plant, not just thinking about the soil. The soil is number one topic, but if we can unload the vine earlier and making great wines is also a different trend, but is also something helping very much the regenerative act of our viticulture, in our case.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Jorge. Yeah, I think it's still okay.
Yeah? Now? Okay, cool. Yeah, that's a really good conclusion about your area, and probably we can share some problems together, because we are really on the south also, where supposedly and theoretically it's not a place to grow grapevines, because we are out of the latitude to make supposedly wine, and this is probably one of the first problems of our region. The water availability that Monsieur Lafage explained, but also the temperature and the climate conditions in general. No? So we don't have enough water, first of all, because we are isolated. We are an island. Obviously, we have a lot of water from the ocean, but this is not interesting. You can desalate the water, but it's not really good in quality. So the only water availability that we have on the island is from the center of the island. So Tenerife, in this case, we are in the Canary Island archipelago, next to the coast of Morocco, and we are receiving every time winds from the north. So we have big volcanoes. The highest mountain in Spain, it's in our island, practically 4,000 meters above sea level. So these big volcanoes, these big walls can trap the winds that are coming from the north and convert these winds in water because of the moisture, no? So that's really interesting, because create bubbles into the mountains that you can extract the water, and you can use this water for irrigation. But the problem here is like this water is private, no? So and the cost and the price of the water is too high, and the quality of the water is not really good, because soils are volcanic, and water have a lot of electric conductivity, no? So that's the first point to avoid. But I think it's more important, as I said to you before, the temperature, because being really on the south, we never have dormancy for the grapevines, so we never have winter. I arrived yesterday from Tenerife at 25 degrees in January, when normally we used to consider to be in winter. So that's not really good for the grapevines, and we can see an increase of the temperature in the autumn. On the last 10 years, an increase of 3 degrees on media. So that's a lot, to be honest, no? So we increased from a media of 14 degrees to 17 in only 10 years. That's not really good for the dormancy. That's not really good for the grapevines. So the stress is not only hydric stress, and the stress is a climatic stress at all, no? So this is the first and most important point on our viticultural area. And to avoid these problems, the only way that we are finding is to make regenerative agriculture, to be honest, no? So we are fighting against ourselves, planting cover crops, but it's the only way we have to retain moisture and retain water on the surface of the soils, to create kind of system to say to the plants, okay, you have water here, but only available for a time, no, not all the year, because if you keep the cover crops during all the year, you can fight against the plants and continuously creating a stress for the plants, no. So obviously water availability is a problem, but for us temperature also it is.
Brilliant, thank you. So we've heard now from two producers where high temperatures and low water availability are the main issue. So you might think, therefore, that the UK would be perfectly positioned with potentially the opposite issue. But that's not necessarily always the case, is it, Kirsty? What's your biggest climatic challenge and how are you mitigating it?
Well, I mean, it's probably worth pointing out that, and although we are in no way advocates of climate change, we are, of course, benefiting on the temperature front. There is probably little doubt it would have been a real struggle 40 years ago to grow. We're growing the champagne varietals, the classic Chardonnay, Pinot Noir, Pinot Meunier, and we have seen actually an average increase in temperature of 1.5 degrees only in, and we've got farm records. So the context of Wiston Estate is it's a sort of 5 or 6 farms, and we have one that is in hand, and it's largely on these rolling downland hills, which is chalky in where we have the vineyards, and then there's 3 different soil types over. We live on the other side of the estate, and it's actually really heavy clay soils. But so the temperature, we are probably often people come over from France and they will taste some of our wines and say this is tasting like what our wines did 40 years ago. The issue is it is a real challenge if you are the vineyard manager when you have no idea if there is ever going to be a dry day on certain summers like last summer. And so, yeah, we don't have the problem, there's no irrigation in our vineyard, and actually when you're on the chalk, I'm sure most of you will be well aware, but once the vines get their roots into the chalk, they've got a wonderful water source. So when we do have those occasional lovely kind of heat waves for us, that's fantastic. But what can be a real challenge is mildew and disease. And actually, overall, and we're kind of all singing off the same hymn sheet here. The other thing is pests. And so we've got this horrible little fly at the moment that has come over from Europe, and we don't blame any of you guys. This is a climate thing. This is because of mild winters that hasn't killed it off. There's a little fly that has a very techie name, but we basically call SWD, and it puts its little
Spotted-winged Drosophila.
There you go. And it puts its little mouth into the grape, and it doesn't do any favors for the taste of it. Now, ultimately, that or having a danger of mildew and disease, really, our vineyard manager would say, overall, it's about having a healthy vine. And how do you have a healthy vine? You need to have really fantastic soils, and it's the top bit above where we have the chalk, which, if you look at chalk and it's the same stuff you write on a chalkboard, you can see it's not like a health food shop. We need to make that bit the health food shop. And so we do a lot of cover cropping with.
If you've never watched a film called 6 Inches of Soil, it's really worth it. It talks about how we all depend on that, how entire life upon Earth depends upon 6 inches of soil. And it's really interesting. It talks through some of the regenerative practices that we're referencing here today. Thank you, Kirsty. I'm now going to pass on to Bruce, because either you get the best of all worlds or you're getting all the problems. So which is it?
Thanks, Anne. I think let's just go one step back, because everyone talks about climate change, which I think is a misnomer. It gives you the feeling that you can change it back. Yeah. And I think we pretty much, from an agricultural perspective, I'm sorry for the bad news, but we've kind of passed that. So I talk about climate breakdown. And we also know, we're not naive, we also know that we're not doing this for the environment. That's it's a dozen companies produce 78% of the world's carbon emissions, and that's a political, economic structuring, which as little farmers, particularly in Africa, we're not going to change. We do it for ourselves. We do it to survive. We are really at that limit where if we don't do something, certainly our livelihoods will go away, but maybe our food's going to go away, and we're at the sharp edge where we can see that. When I say my farm, I mean me and the bank, you know what I mean? We farm right down in the very southern tip of Africa. We're 40 kilometers from the very, it's called Cape Agulhas. Agulhas, it's a Portuguese name, and it's a fascinating part of the world for all sorts of reasons, but the where we've seen climate breakdown affecting us most dramatically is because we're in what's called the Roaring 40s. Now, the Roaring 40s is this big band of wind that's created and storms that come drifting past us from the west to the east that's created by the Coriolis force of the Earth's spinning, and those have become more and more violent over the years, and we're seeing once-in-a-lifetime events taking place, both from, I'm sure some of you may remember Cape Town running out of water in 2018, literally 2 weeks away from an absolute catastrophic event where you've got a city of 5 million people with no water. And it's really interesting watching people behave, because not having food is one thing, not having water means that you die in a couple of days. And you've got 5 million people that are going to start revolting. All the way through to rainfall figures that have never been recorded since the beginning of records. And you can actually see the scars on the mountains from the washaways that have taken place. So I think being where we are is actually a little bit of, we're kind of at the sharp end of both of these, of what we've heard today. And but going back to resilience, so for me, it's the environmental side is tied in 100% to the commercial, economic side, and it's about survival. And how do we do that in a way that we can afford? Talk about biochar. There isn't even a biochar plant in South Africa, because the machine that you need where you burn charcoal under pressure is expensive, and we said about 2 million euros. And also, obviously, we clearly don't have any government support for agriculture. So it's not going to happen. We've got to come up with other ideas. We've actually done an experiment. Don't tell anyone this, because it doesn't do my carbon footprint any good, but we've actually imported biochar to see what the effect would be. And similarly, we've mixed it with compost, mostly a cow compost, but we've also used all sorts of other things that we can find, particularly organic egg producers and chicken farms and all those kind of things. We were talking a little bit earlier about the strategy that one takes, and it's not a single, it's almost a vineyard by vineyard basis. So different soils, different climates, different aspects. You've got the overall problems, and then how do you create resilience in each of those particular pockets? And so you've got all these tools at your disposal. From the one end, you've got organic all the way to biodynamic, all the way to regenerative. What do they all mean? We don't know. We don't know what carbon emissions, how one really...
I can give that one a stab if anyone wants.
Exactly. So it's all this extraordinary amount of confusion. And that doesn't help the economic argument, which is what does the consumer think? So, I mean, a simple thing we were talking about is organic viticulture sounds really great, but you end up compacting your soil because you've got to drive your tractor more, and you spray more. You spray a hell of a lot of copper. I can tell you the one thing during COVID that we learned in Africa was that the older hospitals, which had copper beds, had less COVID because it kills everything. So
just to clarify that for people, the reason that you might need to spray more or apply more in organics is because they're non-systemic chemicals. So a systemic chemical will get in there, do its job, and then it's gone potentially into the soil. Not great. A non-systemic is much gentler, but actually it can wash off and it can just fall away. So you then need to keep applying it and applying more and more and more. And so therefore in organics, where there's a kind of set, there are set minimums, there are set maximums of some things. So it's basically a certification that is global. You have to have very consistent methodology, whereas regenerative is much more about being ecosystem specific, and you have a toolkit you can pick from that is relevant to your specific site.
Yeah, but I mean, I think when I was getting slightly technical and sidetracked. Apologies, but I think my point is that actually it's about what we tell the consumer, and we're in an environment which has this huge anti-alcohol lobby. Which is, as we know, sponsored by the cannabis lobby. They've got a lot of money, a lot of big multinationals, particularly pharma, throwing money at this anti-alcohol rubbish. And in that environment, we've got to use other ideas to sell the wine. And one of them is to talk about organics. And it's a very relevant conversation. But I think regenerative is really what we should be talking about because of the fact that it's a lot more specific to the environment of your little farm and your microclimate or your mesoclimate. So I think in South Africa we're kind of at the edge of both. We've been to, we were just talking with about the drought and having to like suddenly deal with that, to having all our roads washed away, all our bridges destroyed, and not being able to get off the farm for 10 days because there was no way off the farm. We were like an island. And if people tell me that climate change doesn't exist, and there are all sorts of reasons why people say that, unfortunately you can see this neck wasn't developed from playing football. I don't want to get that person in a ruck, because I don't have time for people who say that climate change or climate breakdown doesn't exist. It does.
Bruce, just going to come back to you quickly. First of all, you told a lovely story the other day about how you saw some of these heavy rainfalls, and yet some of your vineyards that had cover crops and had some of those regenerative practices were better protected. Could you just maybe give a bit more on that?
Yeah, it was like a light bulb moment or a Damascus Road experience. So there's all the book knowledge and the kind of thing that you read and you see on other people's farms. And I think one of the nice things about South Africa is that we're the most traveled wine community, and we're very open to ideas, and we really love wines and learning from other people. There's very little of that kind of arrogance that comes from being insular. We know that we've got to learn from other people. And so we took all this idea and we grow organic olives. We grow biodynamic vegetables on a commercial scale. So we've got all this other stuff going on the farm. So we've been doing the cover crop thing, we've been doing the soil thing, and we can go into all the technical reasons about why that's good and how one does it. And then we had this extraordinary flood. So we had double our annual rainfall in 72 hours. It was biblical. And it washed away all the roads, and it washed away all the bridges and everything, and literally we couldn't get into the vineyards. You couldn't get to the vineyards because the tractors couldn't get over the roads. I mean, you're looking at a road that suddenly is that deep, and you can't get over it. So we had to rebuild all our roads. There was not 1 millimeter of damage in our vineyards because of the cover crops. And that was like, oh wow, this actually does work. And for me, it was, okay, well, I was a passionate proponent. Now I'm like John the Baptist, boy. Yeah. People have got to know about this stuff. It's taken me to a whole different level of commitment.
It's like that cover crop thing. It is almost magic because it's doing that above the ground and helping you up there. And then below the ground, it's like enabling the vines to take in or a mineral or something that they otherwise wouldn't be able to. And that is getting really techie, and our vineyard manager would talk to you for hours about why you might want to grow clover there, fodder radish there, Phycelia tenacifolia for a really wonderful name there. But all of those things, it's just like when we're told, when we have COVID, don't just have vitamin D, have vitamin K, because that'll enable you to get your vitamin D. It's that kind of thing going on under the ground. So we are converts to this cover crop thing for sure.
I mean, I don't want this to sound too religious, but we'll coming back to the St. John the Baptist piece. Jean-Marc, how do we spread the gospel? How do we spread the good news of this region? How do we persuade producers? And indeed, I guess at the end of the day, that comes down to how do we persuade consumers that they should be purchasing and they should be putting into practice these principles in their vineyards?
Yeah, it's a good question. And actually, what we can see in France, and pretty sure in most of the other countries producing wine for ages, is like the 50 or 70 last years have been very, very mineral, very active in the vineyard, plugging TH and mineral fertilization and all of that. All of that has to change. But we are convinced, all the people here are convinced that regenerative viticulture or agriculture will surely be the future. But to show and to convince people, you have to back it with science. You have to have people learning about it, showing things, being really factual. Organic or biodegradable. Organic was another problem. You are not used to use anything. You just can use copper and sulfur, which in some cases can be a disaster, and some other cases can be good because we don't have, in our place, doing that way, we don't have so much. I'm actually wishing having some botrytis or some milieu because we never see water. So it's not a problem using copper. But in your case, for example, it's completely different. And I think if we want to see the regenerative going higher, we need to have our industry paying scientists for making more research and showing how good is a cover crop. For example, in our place, the cover crop can be very good too, and we do use it. We have to be careful when spring is coming. We have to scalp it. We scalp it, we let it, but just to avoid the ray burning too much the soil. But we have to work it in a different way than people were used to do it. People were used to plant or don't plant anything, let the native grass going and don't touch. And if you do that, your vine is dying. And many people have been dying their vines, so they don't want to do it anymore. So we need to be sure that, okay, scientifically respected, and I'm pretty sure people will go and will push. And maybe another point which could help the growers to convince the growers maybe is also when you do cover crop, you can easily cap 10 tons of carbon into your soil per hectare and per year. People have, big companies have a credit carbon when they buy, they can buy credit carbon. Why don't you pay, why the government wouldn't pay carbon to the producer, to the vine grower or whatever the agriculture? Because at the end of the day, maybe the viticultors, the vignerons, the wine grower will help the society. So it could be services rendered to the society that could be paid by the society because of the services, you know. And I think if we are factual and if we are able to get a little bit of money, I'm pretty sure you can convince many people to change the mind and to go and to do it in a good way.
I saw the mention of money and Bruce was like, me, I want to speak. But there's a role, I think, for retailers and distributors, mindful of where we are today as well. But Bruce, what's your thinking on that kind of consumer drive?
Just to follow up on Jean-Marc said, the agriculture is actually the savior of the world. And we haven't clicked yet. But one of the elements of agriculture which can actually help soak up some of this legacy carbon that's been spewed into the atmosphere for the last 100 years is viticulture, because it's the one crop that is always sequestering carbon. Because in winter you have a cover crop, and in summer you have the growth of the vine. And as long as you make sure that if you're pruning, not like some of your vineyards, but if you're pruning and those chippings get back into the composting or even just get back into the soil, you're retaining all the carbon. And there isn't another agricultural crop, and there's certainly not another natural and usual thing that happens commercially that does that. And it's quite phenomenal.
Yeah, so wine can save the world. Jorge,
Absolutely.
Have you got anything to add on that?
Yeah, I'm totally agree what you are saying. Like, and in the end, I am following your philosophy because obviously agriculture is the savior of the future. But thinking about the present, that it's what we are living, and probably we are working for the future, but we need to live the present. We are more than saviors for the future. We are protectors of the landscape from today, no? So that's really, really, really important. Obviously, VHR, carbon capture, yeah, and all of the things is really interesting. But all of this, it needs to be important if your philosophy is in agreement with what you feel and what you follow, no? So rest of prunings, obviously, to make compost and coming back with all of these things to the vineyards again is important. But in our situation or in our location, it's a little bit more complicated because of the geology also, no? So our geology is volcanic, it's really young, so we have a lot of different soils with different characteristics. And I am completely agree with you, Jean-Marc, trying to understand that we need to come back to science again to understand better our place, because obviously we can make all of this compost. We have a lot of organic moisture and all of the things. But in our case, these volcanic soils used to be really acid. So we have pH really low or pH really high. And at this pH, manage the soils adding compost is not easy. So the capacity that the plants have to catch the nutrients that you are adding to the soils with these soil characteristics is like you are making nothing, to be honest, no? So exactly, wasting money, exactly, wasting work, wasting hours, wasting workers, money, etc. So what we found 10 years ago is working with cover crops in our climate conditions, that we have a lot of evaporation from the soils and a lot of transpiration from the plants. It's really interesting because with the cover crops we can maintain the moisture and we can start to convert the soils from acids or basics to neutral. No? So obviously change the pH is practically impossible, but say to the grapevines that they have a help to something. It's possible working with cereals and working with legumes, etc. No? So yeah, adding all of your philosophy, I think talking about this is important because science is important to understand that you don't need to waste money. You need to make the work as the best possible way, no?
Thank you. And Kirsty, what are you seeing? Are you seeing any great stories on your vineyard? Are you seeing any great other ways that you think we can inspire other producers and consumers?
Yeah, I think it's really interesting. One of the things, you know, your story of it actually hurting, you know, the consumer being aware of a water shortage. It's like, how do we really make, in this country, people kind of feel it? Well, so you know, in wine, in one way, they're going to feel it if the wine stops tasting good. We are obviously, as you're saying, so motivated to do these things so that our vines are still producing at an optimum, because otherwise immediately there'll be a feedback loop saying, no, we're not going for it. But the other way is to inspire, and we have found actually being part of kind of slightly larger landscape nature recovery programs, which even on our estate, but then we've joined up with other farms and other estates to do what we've called a wheel-to-wave nature corridor, where we're allowing kind of whole rewilded strips through. So it's not that we're not now growing any food or not growing vineyards, but in certain places we are allowing nature to really have the kind of top spot, and that might be leaving a headland of a agricultural field of a cereal crop unharvested, so that then you get all the dried seed heads for the winter. It might be we have what's called beetle banks, which is essentially, trying not to get technical, but just kind of raised up kind of mounds of earth which beetles love, and then they can go and get, if there are aphids or whatever, they come out of there. So lots that encourages beneficial insects, because a lot of what we're, as I said, in this country, we're coping with as the fallout of climate change is some insects in the wrong place at the wrong time. But if you can have enough of the good guys, and interesting, we've just found when you do it on a larger scale, and we've worked with our neighbors at a place called NEP, which some of you might have heard of, and they're on our board, and we work together. They've done the most successful rewilding program. When you start getting into bigger animals, it's suddenly really easy to engage people. It's why a lot of us fly over to Africa, is to see bigger things. And I think actually then, having sort of put our name to some of these programs that are really, we are going out of our way to change, to do it differently. Suddenly people, particularly in our locality, have gone, that is really interesting. Okay. There's a lot of wine out there, but I don't know a lot of wineries who are really, really championing the whole supporting environment, because at the end of the day, if the whole ecosystem isn't working, we're really gonna struggle in the vineyard.
Yeah, definitely. I think as well, we sometimes talk about the fact that we have, as Bruce said, wine can save the world, but also wine is one of the very few agricultural products that goes straight from a field to becoming a luxury product on someone's dinner table, where you can tell that story. So we can help to communicate all of this in a way that other agricultural products can't. Bruce, quickly.
I'm going to be very quick. So there is an easy way to do this. You take this ridiculous, corrupt alcohol tax, which no consumer knows about, which has just been imposed on the wine industry, and all those viticulturists and winemakers that are not regenerative and don't look after the environment, they have to pay it, and the rest of us don't.
I'm
Then
sure
suddenly
lots of
the
people would agree
consumer-
that we have to define what we mean by regenerative first.
Well, once we've defined it and worked it out, and for sure, that is the
There is
process.
definitely something coming. So within Europe, there's going to be more incentivization for natural ecosystems. It's not just going to be about carbon. I
But
think we
you've gotta
will
bring
see
it
those
back to
financial
money.
models. I think we will see these financial models evolve so that instead of it just being incentives for producing carbon effectively, or indeed punishments for not measuring and reducing carbon, that there will then become incentives for biodiversity improvements. But the methodologies are just taking longer to work through.
Yeah, but I'm not worried about the detail.
Sorry.
Talking about the consumer's reaction. How do you get the consumer to know what's going on? You just charge them more for it. And the guys that are doing the right job, they don't have to pay the tax.
We'll lobby for that, shall we? I think it's great, cool. I've got one, we're running quite short on time now, so I've got another question here. So I'm going to start with Jean-Marc. If you were starting in viticulture, knowing then what you know today, what would you have done differently?
Another good question. I think we have a very good project in Lafage today with Justin. Justin Sneedewald, who is a master of wine and a friend of us, and thinking about it for a few years now. And we actually have been learning a lot the last 4 years because of what I was explaining before. Nearly, I don't want to say no water, but 50 or 60% of the water we were used to get. And actually, we've been thinking about it. And the first point, if we have to make a new vineyard, will be to check the water availability. Water availability is number one. If we don't have water, is something that we can say is already lost. When we have water availability in our case, it means that we don't have much water. So if we want to be very resilient, we have to find a solution where the vineyard won't consume too much water. So like 20 years ago or 30 years ago, people were always looking for having the best vineyard was the one facing south. Now we're thinking of the one facing north or facing maybe east. East and north will be fine, but not the one facing south. If we were trellising our vineyard, we will stop and we'll come back to bush vine. It's what we do actually. Yeah? We come back to plant bush vine as we never did for the last 20 years. Instead of having 4,000 plants per hectare, plant 2,000 plants per hectare and have maybe your vineyard with more earth around to grow in a better way. If you can, make the plantation east-west, because you have less insolation at the middle of the day. It's something we like to do. And actually, the plan we have, which is maybe the more impactful, is maybe crafting the vines in place. I mean, planting the rootstock first, waiting another maybe 2 years, and cutting and planting, because today we are buying our plants from nurseries, and 99% of the craft is a kind of technique we call omega crafting, which is not the best technique to have the good flow of sap going up. So it's not working very well, and I can see very, very old vineyards planted. My grandfather doing crafting on site was much better, vigorous vineyard than what we're using now. So we have many options to try to adapt, but the first of it will be water availability, or maybe being on a top hills, so higher altitude to get better dormance, or to get less temperature, because I'm always been talking about water, but as was saying Jorge, maybe the worst thing after water will be the temperature. We had like 1.7 degrees more now than 100 years before in our place. And so the transpiration is higher. We have less water, more transpiration is 2 curves which are not good at all. So if we can go higher to have less transpiration and with water availability, doing what I said before, it can help a lot. A lot of studies are also done on the varietals, trying to find varietals which are maybe better to fight against this drought. But we did plant 40 different varietals in our company to check it. But the conclusion is Grenache and Carignan are surely the best. So maybe the new varietal we want to plant will surely be varietals which with the DNA have a more acidity content. I mean, we are planting, for example, Picpoul Noir. Picpoul Noir is a kind of picpoul, but not white picpoul, it's a black picpoul, which has much more acidity content when you pick it than a Grenache with a lack of water and more temperature are losing its acidity. So maybe find a kind of varietal we could balance more the wines than just thinking about having another varietal, magic varietal. I don't believe on it.
Not sure we've got time to go into a Pee-wee discussion as well. But equally, I'm going to come back now. I think we're running short on time, so we're just going to come back with the final question now to everyone, I think, which is, moving forward, what's your priority in terms of climate adaptation for your vineyards now? What's your absolute priority for the next growing season? Who wants to go first? Okay, yeah.
Wow. So yeah, for the future, all you are saying, guys, is I following all with you, but also in the Canary Island, we are lucky because we never have phylloxera. I don't know if all of you know what is phylloxera. I think so. If not, it was an insect that arrived from America and destroyed all the vineyards, part of them, and they need to replant them all. We never had this problem, so we never need to replant the vineyards. So at some point that's really cool, really fancy, because you can talk about really old vines, really rare grapes, and all of this for the wine industry used to be really interesting. But in another point, we never have nurseries, no? So nurseries with the Omega Graft Union doesn't make sense probably nowadays. But the absence of nurseries in Canary Islands made that the clonal selections are not well made in the past, no? So it's all about muscle selection. It's all about a selection of the vine growers in the fields that at some point is good for the richness and for the biodiversity of the clones, but at the same time, at some point, it's really bad for the mutations. The grapevine plants have a strong mutation process in time. So, and all the mutations used to be for being bad, not for being good, adapting the plants to survive. Because we need to know that grapevines don't want to give us fruits. Grapevines wants to continue surviving, giving seeds to the sun and surviving. So the problem we have is this: we don't have this clonal selection, and the selection by the people in the past was by vigor, by production, and that's all. So the problem we have nowadays is not having dormancy and having this chaotic selection. Probably for the future, we need to take care about the plants and make a virotic clean, but not selecting clones, because the idea is to conserve biodiversity, to conserve the richness of the regions. No? So probably that's the key for the future, I think.
Super interesting. Thank you. Kirsty.
Probably, interestingly for us, I mean, one of the biggest things we've done, and it's been a real financial decision, is we've just employed a full-time ecologist for the farm. And really, to come back to where you guys started, that is so that we can get data, and more data. And I mean, we're doing, it's funky kind of stuff, like you're putting essentially like little microphones into the soil, and you'd think, why on earth would you do that? Well, that is back to the insects. It's kind of working out what insect is where, and therefore have we done the right thing? Because at the end of the day, if whole policies are going to change, if people are going to do things differently, they're only going to put their money where their mouth is if they do see this data, and therefore we have felt, rather than just say to our consumer this, we've got to do the work behind the scenes. And we've got lots and lots of people all over the farm who've done it for years. So other organisations, we work a lot with Sussex University, but this is the first time we've had someone full-time just doing this. And then education for us then, so passing that on. And we have a conservation scheme on one part of the farm, which we've got 3 boys, they're all in the local state school, and every single member of that state school goes through a really hands-on, proactive, they're being given saws and things, so even boys are like, yes, this is actually, and they're looking at how do all these ecosystems interrelate, and how ultimately do we get food on our plate, where you started from, Clive, how do we have some water? So although we might not feel we're in the emergency that you guys, and my mother-in-law is South African, so we've seen every video on the family WhatsApp of all of that, and it is so full on. But, that's coming down the track for us unless we really, get wise up, and really the only other thing on what would we do for the vines and is site selection for us. Let's not make ourselves more problems. Quite a lot of English vineyards without doing them down, but they're planting these bougie candle things for frost. Well, that is just putting shed loads of carbon. It looks really pretty on Instagram, don't get me wrong, but I mean the amount of smoke putting. Choose your site, go round for 5 years before, no joke, with loads and loads and loads of frost indicators.
Technology and precision viticulture is gonna, I think, be transformative. The ecoacoustics thing, by the way, if you haven't heard about ecoacoustics things in vineyards, it's so cool. Look it up on Instagram. You literally put probes in and it tells you what insects and how much insect life you've got in the soil, and it's very cool. Bruce, over to you. What's your priority for climate adaptation in your vineyards for the next growing season?
Well, I think the question before, which Jean-Marc was able to answer, is that I would have been born in Burgundy, would have been the first thing I would have done differently. And then knowing climate breakdown was happening, I would have sold it to a tech entrepreneur just in time, and I would have bought a vineyard in England.
Amazing. I'm about to say you still can, mate. There's a few up for sale. I'll talk to you later.
I think technology plays a huge role. The wonderful thing about the wine industry is you've got to think like a poet, but see like a scientist. And one of the things that we're doing, which sounds pretty cool to me, but I am struggling to get it through the accountant, is that I don't know if you've seen these, we call them spulpunten in South Africa, and they're these big round things that go around and make big circles. What are they called? Center pivots is the English word. So we've actually adapted an old second-hand center pivot to grow vineyards.
Wow.
And no one's ever seen it, which is why it's probably not going to work. And also very, very high cordons, and sheep underneath. So the problem I was trying to explain to Jean-Marc earlier is that, sheep get eaten by leopards in South Africa, so that we have other challenges. But
that doesn't happen in Sussex.
But if you get a really big sheep, so you keep the little lambs away, and when they're really big and sturdy and ready to play in the front row, then they can come out in the vineyards, and that's and so you've got continual, almost like a biodynamic process taking place in the vineyard, and then it's all solar powered. So that spulpunt center pivot works completely with solar power, and we're able to irrigate, we're able to spray, we're able to put compost down, all without the use of tractors, which of course is the big problem with soil compaction. So you're going to have a much quicker uptake, and then of course. To Jean-Marc's point about nurseries, it's all about actually being self-sustainable, having your own nursery on site. And what we do is we actually graft, and then we keep the vine in a greenhouse. We've already been doing this for a number of years, and we let them get resilient and big before we plant them out. Because if you hit a drought year, you plant a vineyard, they all die.
Amazing, thank you. We have probably got, Jean-Marc, did you want to have a final comment on that?
Actually, what we are going to do as the next season, what we can say is climate change is a very long period of time, and forecast is a short period. And now we have to just fight about the forecast. We know that regenerative viticulture, maybe in a longer term, is a good vision, is a good mission, and it can help a lot. But today, our main query is having more water retention in our soil. So we will do cover crop, we will do biochar, we will do organic matter, whatever. We won't do any TH for sure, and we will just try to be focused in the soil. I will say as like 80% of our viticulture. After we could also talk about bats or things like that. What is important to me to say is when I was student, people were saying, "Oh, I was student in a place of time that mineral and TH and all that kind of agriculture was teaching at school." And people were saying, yeah, if you want to go to the organic, you can do it, but it will take very, very long, which is actually not true. When you go back to cover crop, when you go back to having bats, we have, it's very funny because in our place, we put 120 nests for bats. And actually, because I'm a bit, I like the science, and I want to know how many there are in. We did with the company where they are able to account the bats. So they come twice a year with a stick and with a camera, and they do check how many bats they have in each nest. And the first time I've seen them, I said, no, but those people are silly. There is none. And I went with them, and at the first nest, left two bats. Wow, what? And actually, in 117 nests, the first year we had 25 bats, but the year number 2 we were 99. So it's working actually. So, and it's not so long. So we have to convince people too that when they start the work, they can have result. And it's not like working for the next generation. The problem, as Bruce was saying, is today. It's not for us, it's today. It's also tomorrow, but he has to work in a quicker time. And it works, actually. So let us do it and do it in a good way. Surely do it in a good way.
Amazing. Thank you. Has anyone got any burning questions for the panel? Yes. Yeah, do you each want to say which table you're on so people can come and taste your wines?
The number is, but we're on the new kids on the block table because we've only just joined Hallgarten just now. Yeah. So it's over that side.
We are on the right Spain.
98.
Bruce, where are you?
Sorry, we're on the other side of South Africa. When you need to go to the loo, that's where we are.
So he's from. So we've got
strategic position.
We've got Kirsty from Wiston Estate, Bruce from Bruce Jack Wines, Jorge from Viñátigo, and Jean-Marc from Lafage.
That's why you look so good.
And all the wines are excellent, obviously. Any other questions? Otherwise, I'm just going to thank our panel very much. Really insightful. Bruce wants to ask a question.
Can I just ask one very quick question? Those of you in the sales role who are up in the most difficult job in the whole world, how do you think? Is there anyone who's got any idea of how you get the consumer to start thinking about regenerative viticulture?
I have seen for the last 15 years biodynamic and all kind of systems. I'm sorry, I call it mambo jumbo. For 15 years, and for the first time, what I'm here listening is what the new revolution for wine. Because we've been to too many chemicals to know. So when it came to one extreme, and you have right balance in the middle. Now it's your job to communicate with the people, and you need a logo, you need everything. And it's the story of the bags. Can you believe that you got a bottle with the vineyard, they've got bags. The customer will only remember that. Selling point. You have so many stories behind your label. We don't have anymore, you know?
Yeah.
And it's amazing. I love it.
Thank you very much. Let's all go tell some stories.
Logo.
Well, Regenerative Viticulture Foundation, we're redoing our logo. Lovely. Thanks very much, everyone. That was a really insightful session, and thank you all for coming. Have a lovely rest of the day.
Thank you.